On the morning of June 16th, 1976, something extraordinary was happening in the streets of Soweto, South Africa. It wasn't soldiers or seasoned activists who filled the roads, but children. Thousands of them, dressed in their school uniforms, some were neatly pressed. Others worn thin from use, they walked with a purpose, carrying notebooks, pens, and handmade signs. Their protest wasn't about the grand politics adults debated. It was about something deeply personal, their education, their dignity, and their future. They marched because they refused to be erased. At the time, South Africa was under the iron grip of apartheid, a brutal system of racial segregation. The government had just passed a new decree, a rule that felt like a final, unbearable insult. It declared that Afrikaans, the language of their oppressors, would become a mandatory medium of instruction in black schools. For these students, who were already struggling in overcrowded classrooms with barely any resources, this was an attack on their very identity. Learning in their own languages was already a challenge. Now they were being forced to learn subjects like math and science in a language they barely understood and deeply resented. So they decided to walk out. The plan was simple and peaceful. Students from numerous schools across Soweto would march to Orlando Stadium for a rally. They organized in secret, whispering plans in hallways and passing notes in class. They created placards with messages like "Down with Afrikaans" and "To hell with Bantu education." They believed in the power of their numbers and in the inherent rightness of their cause. They sang freedom songs, their voices rising together in a chorus of hope and defiance. There was a sense of optimism, a youthful belief that the world, if it just saw them, would have to listen. They were children, after all. What harm could they possibly do? They thought their youth would be their shield. They were tragically wrong. As the columns of students converged, they found their path blocked. Ahead of them stood a line of police officers, armed and tense. These weren't community police. They were agents of a state built on fear and control. To them, this gathering of children wasn't a protest. It was a threat. The air grew thick with tension. The singing faltered as the students saw the weapons pointed in their direction. The police shouted orders to disperse, but the students held their ground. They had come too far to turn back now. They raised their fists in the black power salute, a gesture of solidarity and defiance. Then, without warning, the chaos began. A police officer threw a tear gas canister into the front ranks of the crowd. The canister sailed through the air and landed among the children, releasing clouds of stinging, suffocating gas. Students scattered, their eyes burning, their lungs on fire. The peaceful protest dissolved into a scene of confusion and terror. And then came the sound that would echo through history, the sharp crack of gunfire. The police had opened fire on unarmed school children. Panic erupted. The songs of freedom were replaced by screams of pain and fear. Children ran in every direction, desperate to escape the bullets. Some tripped and fell, trampled in the stampede. Others, incredibly brave, turned back to help their fallen friends, dragging them out of the line of fire. In the midst of this horror, a single moment was captured that would sear the conscience of the world. A young photographer named Sam Zima raised his camera and snapped a picture. The photograph showed a 13-year-old boy, Hector Peterson, who had been shot by the police. He was dying. Another student, Baisa Makubo, had scooped him up into his arms and was running, trying to get him to safety. Running beside them was Hector's 17-year-old sister, Antoinette, her face a mask of anguish and disbelief. This single image of a child carrying another child, a sister's grief etched forever in a moment, became the symbol of the Soweto uprising. It showed the world the true face of apartheid, a system so cruel, so paranoid, that it would gun down its own children in the street. By the end of that day, the streets of Soweto were littered with stones, discarded shoes, and the bodies of students. The official government count of the dead was low, a deliberate attempt to downplay the massacre. But the community knew the truth. Hundreds of children and young people were killed on that day and in the weeks that followed. The uprising, however, did not end on June 16th. What happened in Soweto was like a spark landing on dry tinder. The anger and defiance spread like wildfire across South Africa. From the townships of Cape Town to the cities of the Eastern Cape, young people rose up. They boycotted classes, organized protests, and clashed with police. The students of 1976 became the new vanguard of the struggle against apartheid. They showed a level of courage that stunned the regime and inspired the world. The government responded with overwhelming force. Thousands were arrested, tortured, and imprisoned. Security forces were given free rein to crush the dissent. But something fundamental had shifted. The fear had changed sides. The youth had lost their fear of death, and the government was now terrified of its own children. The Soweto uprising was a turning point. It exposed the lie that apartheid could ever be reformed or stable. It showed the international community the sheer brutality of the regime in a way that speeches and reports never could. The image of Hector Peterson was published on the front pages of newspapers around the globe, sparking outrage and condemnation. This led to intensified calls for international sanctions, divestment, and a full cultural and sporting boycott of South Africa. The pressure, both internal and external, began to build, creating cracks in the foundations of the apartheid state. Years later, after the fall of apartheid and the birth of a new, democratic South Africa, the legacy of that day was formally honored. June 16th was declared a national holiday, Youth Day. It is not a day of celebration, but a day of solemn remembrance. It is a day to honor the courage of the students who marched for their rights, who faced bullets with nothing but stones and the conviction of their beliefs. It is a reminder that freedom is never freely given, and that sometimes the price is paid by the very young. Today, in Soweto and across South Africa, the classrooms are different. The hated policy of Bantu education is gone. Students can learn in their own languages, and the curriculum is designed to empower, not to oppress. But the echoes of 1976 remain. Every lesson taught freely, every child who graduates with dignity, stands on the shoulders of those who marched on that fateful day. Their sacrifice paved the way for the generations that followed. The story of the Soweto uprising is a powerful testament to the fact that courage does not wait for adulthood. It reminds us that ordinary people, even children, can change the course of history when they stand together for what is right. Some revolutions are led by generals and politicians. But the revolution that began to unravel apartheid was written in the streets of Soweto by students carrying school books. It was written by children, and it changed South Africa forever. Thank you for watching. If you found this story powerful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the moments that shape our world.